The text arrived just before noon, short and sharp, like a slap. Don't come to the BBQ. Daniel Mercer stared at the screen, reading it again to make sure he hadn't missed something. No explanation. No humor. No follow-up. It was from his younger brother, Ethan, a man who usually talked too much and explained everything twice. The words felt wrong, heavy, out of place. Daniel locked his phone and looked around his office, suddenly aware of how quiet everything felt. Outside the glass windows, the city moved as always, unaware that something had cracked open in his life. The BBQ had been planned for weeks. Their parents' house. Family, laughter, food, small talk. Normal things. Daniel had been looking forward to it, even though work had been exhausting lately. That morning, his wife Claire had mentioned the BBQ again, but she had done it without looking at him. She moved through the kitchen carefully, like someone trying not to make noise. Daniel had noticed, but he hadn't asked. He trusted her. Trust was easy when nothing had ever gone wrong before. Still, the text stayed with him. Ethan wasn't the type to be rude without reason. If he said, "Don't come," then something had already happened. Daniel considered calling him, but pride stopped him. So did a quiet instinct telling him that the truth would come on its own, whether he wanted it or not. The hours passed slowly. Daniel tried to focus on work, but his thoughts kept drifting. Small memories rose without warning. Ethan laughing with Claire at the last family dinner. The way Claire had started checking her phone more often. How Ethan had avoided staying alone with Daniel lately. At the time, none of it had seemed important. Now it all felt connected, like puzzle pieces snapping into place too late. At 2:15 p.m., Daniel's office door opened without a knock. Claire stepped inside first. Her face was pale, her eyes tired. She looked like someone who hadn't slept. Behind her came Ethan. His posture was stiff, his hands clenched at his sides. He didn't smile. He didn't joke. He didn't meet Daniel's eyes. Daniel stood up slowly. "What's going on?" he asked. No one answered. The silence was thick, pressing against his ears. Claire closed the door behind them, the soft click sounding louder than it should have. Ethan finally looked up, his face tight with guilt and something close to fear. "You weren't supposed to find out like this," Ethan said. That single sentence told Daniel everything and nothing at the same time. His chest tightened. His mind raced ahead, filling in gaps before the words could catch up. Brother, wife, secrets, exclusion, the text, the silence. Find out what? Daniel asked, though his voice already sounded distant to his own ears. Claire swallowed hard. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her hands trembled slightly. Ethan stepped forward, as if trying to protect her, or maybe himself. "We didn't plan this," Ethan said quickly. "It just happened." Daniel felt the floor shift beneath him, even though he was standing still. He sat down, gripping the edge of his desk. His office, once a place of control and order, now felt too small. "Say it clearly," Daniel said. "Don't hide behind words." Ethan took a breath. "We crossed a line." The words were simple, but they landed with force. Daniel looked at Claire. She nodded once, tears gathering in her eyes. "It wasn't physical," she said fast. "If that mattered most, at least not at first. It was talking, sharing things, leaning on each other." Daniel said nothing. His mind replayed every late meeting, every excuse, every moment he had chosen trust over suspicion. "I felt lonely," Claire continued. "You were busy, always working. I didn't mean for it to go this far." Ethan added, "I never wanted to hurt you." You're my brother. The word brother echoed painfully. Daniel had protected Ethan his entire life. Covered for him, supported him, trusted him around the one person who mattered most. Then why the text? Daniel asked quietly. Ethan looked down. I didn't want you to hear it from someone else. Mum noticed something. People were asking questions. I panicked. Daniel nodded slowly. So the BBQ wasn't about food or family. It was about damage control. Keeping him away until they could decide how much truth he deserved. The realization hurt more than the betrayal itself. Claire stepped closer. I'm sorry, she whispered. I never stopped loving you. Daniel finally stood again. His legs felt heavy, but his voice was calm. Too calm. You made choices, he said. Both of you did. And you decided I didn't deserve honesty. Neither of them argued. The truth hung in the air, undeniable now. Daniel looked at the two. People he trusted most, standing together in front of him like strangers. Something inside him hardened, not into rage, but into clarity. He understood then that whatever came next would change all of them. You should go, Daniel said. Claire hesitated. Ethan opened his mouth, then closed it. They left without another word. When the door shut, Daniel sank back into his chair. His phone buzzed again, but he ignored it. The BBQ would go on without him. Laughter would fill the backyard. Plates would be passed around. And somewhere between casual smiles and forced normality, his absence would speak louder than any argument. In that quiet office, Daniel felt the first spark of something dark and focused take shape. He didn't know yet what he would do with it, but he knew one thing for certain. The man who walked into his office that morning was not the same man sitting there now. The days after the truth came out moved strangely fast and painfully slow at the same time. Daniel went through his routine on autopilot. He woke up, dressed, drove to work, answered emails, led meetings. To everyone else, he looked the same. Inside, his thoughts ran non-stop, sharp and restless. Every quiet moment pulled him back to that office, to Claire's shaking voice and Ethan's lowered eyes. At night, the house felt too big. Claire had packed a bag and left the same evening, saying she needed space. Daniel hadn't stopped her. The silence she left behind was heavier than any argument. He walked through the rooms, noticing things he had ignored for years: the picture frames, the shared furniture, the small marks of a life built together. Each item now felt like a question with no answer. His mind replayed conversations again and again. Ethan saying it just happened. Claire saying she felt lonely. Daniel tried to understand their reasons, not to forgive them, but to make sense of his own pain. The more he thought, the clearer one thing became. They hadn't made one mistake. They had made many small choices, each one easier than the last, each one pushing him further out. Anger came later. Not loud or wild, but focused and controlled. It settled in his chest and stayed there. He didn't throw things or shout. Instead, he planned. His thoughts shifted from why to what now. He knew enough about both of them to cause serious damage, if he wanted to. Texts, messages, patterns, timelines. Truth had a way of becoming dangerous when placed in the right hands. Daniel started noticing details he had once ignored. Ethan's career depended on trust and image. Claire's reputation mattered deeply to her. Their lives were carefully balanced, built on how others saw them. Daniel realized he could tip that balance with very little effort. One conversation, one email, one public moment of honesty. The idea gave him a strange sense of calm. He told himself it would be justice, not revenge. They had taken something from him: his trust, his sense of safety, his future as he had imagined it. Why should they walk away with clean hands while he carried the damage alone? But another voice spoke up in the quiet hours. It asked what revenge would actually give him. Would exposure heal him, or would it tie him to their actions forever? Would hurting them make him whole again, or just turn the pain outward? Daniel tried to picture life after revenge. He saw short-term relief, maybe, even satisfaction. Then he saw long nights filled with the same thoughts, the same bitterness, only now with guilt added to the mix. He didn't want to become someone he couldn't respect. Still, letting go felt like weakness. He met Ethan once briefly in a neutral cafe. The tension between them was thick. Ethan looked worn down, older than his years. He spoke quickly, explaining himself again, repeating how sorry he was, how confused everything had become. Daniel listened without interrupting. "I never thought it would reach this point," Ethan said. "I kept telling myself I'd stop." Daniel nodded. "But you didn't." Ethan looked down. "No." That simple answer stayed with Daniel long. After the meeting ended, it wasn't anger that scared him anymore. It was how easy it had been for Ethan to justify each step along the way. Claire sent messages too. Long ones. Emotional ones. She wrote about regret, about feeling invisible, about wishing she could go back. Daniel read them once, then stopped replying. Each message pulled him backward, and he needed to move forward, even if the direction was unclear. The planning continued quietly. Daniel didn't rush. He gathered information, not because he needed more proof, but because it gave him a sense of control. Knowledge became his shield. He wanted to be ready if he chose to act. Sleep came in short stretches. When he dreamed, he saw moments from the past twisted into new shapes: family dinners, shared jokes, warm smiles that now felt false. He woke up with his jaw clenched, heart racing. One evening, alone in his apartment, Daniel finally admitted the truth to himself. He wanted revenge, not out of cruelty, but out of a deep need to balance the scale. He wanted them to feel what he felt. The loss, the shock, the collapse of certainty. At the same time, he feared what that desire said about him. He thought about his father, a man who believed in quiet strength and dignity. He thought about the person he had always tried to be: fair, controlled, steady. Was revenge a betrayal of that man or a defense of his own worth? The conflict wore him down. Every choice felt heavy. Do nothing and carry the hurt alone. Act and risk becoming defined by it. Daniel realized there was no clean answer. Whatever he chose would leave a mark. Late one night, he stood by the window and looked out at the city lights. Thousands of lives, thousands of private battles, all hidden behind walls and windows. His was just one of them, but it felt enormous to him. He made a decision then, not the final one, but an important step. He would confront them again, not in anger, not in chaos. He would face them with clarity and force them to face themselves. After that, he would choose his path. Revenge no longer felt like a single act. It felt like a crossroads, and Daniel knew he was getting close. Daniel scheduled the meeting for a Friday afternoon, late enough that the office floor was almost empty. He chose the time carefully. Fewer people meant fewer interruptions. This was not a scene he wanted witnessed. He wanted control, not noise. When he sent the message asking Claire and Ethan to come, he kept it short. "We need to talk. My office. Today." No emotion. No explanation. They arrived together again. That detail did not escape him. Claire walked in first, her steps cautious, her face tense. Ethan followed, jaw tight, shoulders stiff. Both looked like people preparing for a verdict they could not escape. Daniel stood as they entered, calm on the surface, steady in posture. Inside, his heart beat hard, but he welcomed it. This moment had been building for weeks. "Sit," Daniel said. They did. For a few seconds, no one spoke. The silence pressed down on them, heavier than shouting ever could. Daniel moved behind his desk and placed 3 envelopes neatly in a row. He didn't rush. Every movement was measured. "I didn't bring you here to argue," Daniel said. "I brought you here because I've reached the point where I have to choose." Ethan shifted in his chair. Claire's hands were folded tightly in her lap. Daniel slid the first envelope forward. "This contains messages, dates, timelines, not guesses. Facts." Claire's breath caught. Ethan's eyes widened slightly. "The second envelope," Daniel continued, "contains documents you weren't expecting to see yet. Legal ones." He pushed the third envelope forward last. It was thin, almost empty. "And this one," he said, "represents everything I could still do but haven't." Ethan swallowed hard. "Daniel, please." "Don't," Daniel said quietly. "You've talked enough." He leaned forward slightly, his voice calm but sharp. "You both made choices assuming I would either never find out or forgive quietly. You counted on my silence." Claire looked up, tears forming. "I never wanted to hurt you." Daniel nodded once. "Intent doesn't erase impact." He stood and walked toward the window, looking out at the city for a moment before turning back. "I've spent weeks thinking about how to hurt you back. And make no mistake, I can." Ethan lowered his head. Claire's shoulders shook slightly. "I could expose everything," Daniel said. "Not with lies. With truth. I could change how people see you. I could make your lives harder overnight." He paused, letting the words sink in. "And part of me wanted that. I wanted you to feel powerless, the way I did." Claire stood up suddenly. "I'll accept whatever you decide," she said. "I deserve it." Daniel studied her face. He saw fear, regret, and something else, relief that the waiting might finally end. He turned to Ethan. "You're my brother," Daniel said. "That fact makes this worse, not better." Ethan's voice cracked. "I know." Daniel took a breath. This was the edge. The point of no return. He felt the weight of it in his chest. He imagined the satisfaction of watching them fall apart. Then he imagined waking up months later, still tied to this moment, still angry, still replaying it. He pushed the empty envelope toward them. "This is my choice," Daniel said. "I'm not destroying you." Claire looked confused. Ethan looked stunned. "Not because you don't deserve consequences," Daniel added, "but because I don't want my future shaped by what you did." He stepped back behind his desk. "Our marriage is over. That's not a threat. It's a fact. I won't pretend anymore." Claire closed her eyes, tears slipping free. "And as for you," Daniel said to Ethan, "I don't know what our relationship will look like. Right now, there isn't one." Ethan nodded slowly. "I understand." Daniel felt something loosen inside him. Not relief exactly, but release. The decision was made. The path was set. "You can go," he said. They stood. Claire hesitated, as if wanting to say something more, then stopped herself. Ethan opened the door, pausing only once. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. Daniel did not respond. When the door closed, the office felt strangely light. The anger that had driven him for weeks didn't vanish, but it lost its grip. He sat down, hands resting on the desk, breathing slowly. He had stood at the edge of revenge and stepped back. The choice did not feel heroic. It felt difficult, heavy, real. But for the first time since the betrayal, Daniel felt like himself again. Life did not reset after that day. It moved forward, uneven and quiet. Daniel left the house he once shared with Claire and settled into a smaller apartment closer to work. The rooms were plain, almost empty, but they felt honest. There were no memories hiding in the corners, no echoes of conversations that now hurt to recall. Each morning he woke up alone, and while the loneliness stung, it also brought clarity. The divorce moved forward without drama. Papers were signed. Decisions were made. Claire did not fight him. She looked tired when they met, like someone carrying a weight she could not put down. Daniel stayed polite and distant. He no longer searched her face for answers. Whatever understanding he needed, he had already found within himself. Work became his anchor. The structure helped. Meetings, deadlines, clear goals. He poured his focus into progress rather than memory. Slowly his sleep improved. His thoughts became less sharp, less restless. The anger that once followed him everywhere faded into something quieter, something easier to carry. Ethan stayed away. Weeks passed without contact. Daniel heard bits of news through family, nothing dramatic, just a brother struggling with regret and distance. Their parents sensed the damage but did not push for explanations. Everyone moved carefully around the truth, as if afraid of breaking something else. Some nights were harder than others. Daniel would sit by the window, watching lights turn on, and often nearby buildings. He thought about how close he had come to choosing revenge, how easy it would have been to release everything he knew and walk away feeling justified. The thought still tempted him at times, especially on nights when the silence felt too heavy. But he reminded himself of the meeting in his office, of the moment he chose not to cross that line. That memory became his quiet proof that he was still in control of who he was becoming. Months later, his phone buzzed while he was making coffee. A message from Ethan. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I think about what I did every day." Daniel stared at the screen for a long time. His first instinct was to ignore it. His second was to answer with something sharp. He set the phone down, finished his coffee, then picked it up again. He typed slowly, "I hope you learn from it." He didn't add anything else. No anger, no comfort, just truth. After sending it, he felt lighter than he expected. Not because the past was fixed, but because he no longer needed to punish anyone to feel balanced. The damage had already been acknowledged. That was enough. Time continued its quiet work. Daniel started exercising again. He met friends he had neglected. He learned how to enjoy his own company. There were moments of sadness, but they passed more quickly now. Healing, he learned, was not dramatic. It was made of small choices repeated daily. One evening, he received an invitation to a family gathering. He hesitated, then accepted. When he arrived, Ethan was there. They exchanged a brief nod. No words. No tension. Just space. It was enough for now. As Daniel drove home later that night, he reflected on everything he had survived. Betrayal had shaken him, but it had not broken him. Revenge had tempted him, but it had not claimed him. He had chosen a harder road, one without instant satisfaction, but with room to breathe. Standing at his apartment window, he looked out at the city once more. Life was imperfect. Trust was fragile. But peace, he realized, came not from hurting those who hurt you, but from refusing to let their choices define your future. Daniel turned off the lights and went to bed, knowing that while the past would always be part of his story, It would not be the ending.